very sunny, although it's very cold and windy. And for those of you who have stayed up late in order to catch us, thank you very much. Now, today we are going to have the second hangout, in which the objective is to give you some feedback on the activities 1 and 2. And activity 1 is going to be handled by Amberit Kabli, and then activity 2 will be explained by Stephanie Dolata. So right now I'm going to give the floor to Amberit.
Thank you very much, Miyoko, and good afternoon to everybody. My name is Anne-Berit Kavli, and I'm going to give you the feedback from the activity 1 on the MOOC of learning assessments. So this activity has been about the reflection on the importance of learning assessments for stakeholders at different levels. So we will now go to the presentation. So here you see the title of this first activity, reflecting on the importance of learning assessments. And before we actually go to the feedback, I would just like to point to this quote: "Without data, you are just another person with an opinion." As you have heard earlier in this course, the history of large-scale international learning assessments started early in the 1960s with the first IEA studies on mathematics and science, and have seen a very large growth, especially since 2000 and the start of the PISA study. So this quote actually reflects the importance of relevant and valid data as evidence for further educational development at all levels. So why learning assessments? Before we start the discussion, I think it's very important to emphasize that the main purpose of an assessment system should always be to form a basis for improved learning for all students. Therefore, the students should always be at the center of a learning assessment systems. But assessments in themselves cannot improve learning of results if they are not analyzed and brought back to the stakeholders. So to use the assessments as basis for improvement will require targeted feedback to all levels, to pupils and parents on the pupils' learning and learning environment, to teachers and schools on the pupils' performance, and to school authorities on the efficiency of schools, to policymakers on evidence for further policy development. So this is what we will discuss further during this feedback. This illustration, which we can call the quality circle, illustrates how the results from assessments can be a basis for improvement and further development in a quality assessment framework. First, the result from the assessment is recorded and analyzed. And based on this, we get information at all levels about strengths and weaknesses. Where do our pupils succeed, and where do we actually need to improve learning? This can then lead to plans for improvement, to implementation, and to support. And then we are back to new measures of the status. So if you go back to this first activity, the question is, why is learning assessment important for international organizations, for educational decision makers and managers, and for inspectors, school heads, teachers, and parents? Actually, pupils were not mentioned specifically in this activity, but as mentioned earlier, the main purpose of any assessment system is improved learning for our pupils. We have received quite a lot of responses from participants, and we are very impressed about the high activity and the high quality of the responses we have received. Around 300 responses have been recorded for each of the discussion threads. Most participants have used relevant international and national sources in the responses, and many participants have given valuable and interesting examples from their own countries and their own experience. The activity has been divided in 3 threads, and the first thread was the importance for the international organizations. In the global community, education is more and more seen as the most important driver for development and growth. This is also why education for all has been an important part of the 2015 Millennium Goals. And through the Incheon Declaration in 2015, this is brought further by the new Sustainable Development Goal for Education, which states that we want to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all, and by 2030 to ensure that all girls and boys complete free, equitable and quality primary and secondary education, leading to relevant and effective learning outcomes. In other words, the emphasis on education is even increased, and the focus is now not only on the access to education, but equally on the outcomes of education. So based on the global commitment to the importance of relevant learning outcomes, the importance of learning assessments can be summarized in these points. First of all, monitoring countries' development towards the international educational goals with a focus on learning outcomes and on equity and inclusion. Then to provide international benchmarks for key learning outcomes, to provide information on development over time, trends at regular intervals, and to provide information on learning conditions and how this relates to learning outcomes. Provide evidence-based information for policy and curriculum development, and to build research and assessment capacity in countries. So if we move to thread 2, we had a discussion on the importance of learning assessments for educational decision makers and managers. This could be decision makers at national or state level, or local school authorities at county or municipality level. And for these stakeholders, the monitoring of the efficiency of schools, to which extent their schools reach the expected educational goals and standards for learning outcomes, inclusion and gender equality is important. Also, for decision makers to identify areas for development and for improvement, to give feedback to schools and districts and take actions for improvement towards low-performing schools, and to use learning assessments for accountability and resource allocation. And finally, to identify areas for policy and curriculum development. The last thread was focusing on the importance for inspectors, school heads, teachers, and parents. And as you see, I have also put up pupils in this overview. So if we start with the pupils, which are at the center of all the assessments, first of all, I will point to the need for feedback on achievement of the learning goals based on formative classroom assessments, diagnostic tests, etc. The identification of strengths and weaknesses in the students' learning outcomes, and also we use assessments like exams to give final grades and certifications based on these summative assessments. If we then move to the parents, they will of course need information on the progression of their children. They will also need information on the efficiency and learning conditions in their children's schools. And in addition, results from assessments can also, where this is relevant, give a basis for school choice. For teachers, feedback, guidance, and supervision on their teaching can be given based on assessment results, and also assessment results can give an evidence base for more formal appraisal and also for career development for teachers. At the principals and inspectors level, again, feedback, guidance, and supervision on the management and efficiency of schools is quite important. and in addition, evidence of efficiency and the performance related to the educational goals. So by this, I will end the presentation for now. Thank you all for listening to the Hangout, and we will come back to questions later in this session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Berit. Now, I'm going to now give floor to Stephanie Dorata to give you the feedback for activity 2.
Okay, thank you, Miyoko. So my name is Stephanie Donata. I am one of the professionals here at IIP. Thank you. So I'm going to provide some feedbacks about the activity number 2, where we invite you to describe one of the assessments of your education system in your country. So I'm going to open a document, the Word document. Okay, so this is a feedback that we prepare and that will be put online at the end of this Hangout. Yeah. I have some comments before going into the different assessment, the descriptions. More than some 540 participants have completed this activity number 2 by describing one existing assessment according to 5 questions that were asked. First, what type of assessment is it? 2, who are in charge of developing and who are in charge of implementing? 3, subjects, what has been assessed? 4, what levels? And the last was about what frequency. There was another question is about your role in this assessment, whether you participate or not, and so on. Among your responses, we have identified 3 main assessment procedures. This is how I call. First, most participants, they decide to describe the public examination. The second assessment chosen was the classroom assessment, and very few of participants described the learning outcomes assessment. This is how I call. It is important to know that all these procedures can be implemented in your country. So maybe Miyoko will tell you later, we encourage the participants from the same country to share their results and to continue to exchange on this. So what I try to do is to analyze your response and to identify the main aspects of the 3 types of assessment. So let's first start with the classroom assessment. The classroom assessment focuses on individual students. It aims to provide immediate feedback about strengths, weakness for the teacher and also for the students. It is formative and summative, and the teachers are responsible in designing and also in implementing this assessment. And sometimes there is a school head who also provides some support. What subjects? In fact, all of them could be part of the assessment. What levels? So this type of assessment is conducted at all grade levels. Frequency, this is the 5th question. This is done during the school academic year at frequent time and continuously. So as I said, there was a last question about your roles in this assessment, and around half of the participants say they don't have any role. Some were former students, so they were remembering this assessment. The teacher, they were the one who are preparing the students, developing and implementing the assessment. And finally, there were some trainers of teachers who were also describing this process, as well as the school heads. The second type of assessment that has been described by the participant. It was what I call the public national examination, and this is for individual students. This type of examinations serves for the certification of the students at the end of the cycle, usually. And they are sometimes used for selecting the best students for further education level and scholarships, and as well as applying for a job. The examination results can also be used by the schools to measure their effectiveness, as well as the teachers, but it depends whether the results are published or not. What was very interesting among the participants who are describing this examination is that in the name of the examination, you can see that it used to refer to a certificate and to a level of education. For example, basic education certificate examination. So it is clear that there is a certificate and it's about the basic education. So what type of assessment is it? It is mainly summative, but it can be also used as formative. So this is a discussion that we could have with Miyoko. Who are in charge of developing and implementing, it is a Ministry of Education. But here there is no one model of developing and also implementing this. It varies from the countries to another country. And for example, there can be some department units in charge of doing those duties within the ministry, or they can be external governmental councils, for example, in charge. And what was very interesting is to see that all levels are involved in this process. Central, regional, district, and school level. For example, a teacher who is in charge to conduct this examination within the school can also be one of the person who will design the test item. Can also be the one who mark the examination and so on. What subjects are assessed? So it differs from the countries. There are countries where all subjects are assessed, other only core, and other countries where there is core and optional subjects. So candidates can choose some subjects, additional subjects. What levels used to be at the end of the cycle? Primary, junior secondary, for example, senior secondary, and so on. It is done annually. And the roles, so we ask about the roles. So as I say, a lot of participants say they don't have any specific role. Others were former students. There were some teachers, trainers in teacher and training centers, for example. There was very few participants who mentioned that they were members of the national team or the regional team or district team in charge to implement this public examination. There was also one supervisor in the examination center and so on. In terms of developing the assessment, it used to be done within the ministry or through a department, or also there's a council. And at the same time, we can see also the involvement of different persons, such as teachers, school inspector, subjects, curriculum experts, and so on. In terms of using the results in guiding policy, there were some educational planners who mentioned that they use that for policy, curriculum specialists to identify some gaps, and in addition to review the curriculum. School inspectors also, they wanted to know more about what is going on in their local area, researchers, and etc. And some participants also mentioned regional examination that is done at regional level by council established. So they provide, they are in charge of conducting the examination as well as certification. The last type of assessment described by the participants are what I call the learning outcomes assessment. And here, the assessment is not focused on individual students. It's more focused at the level of the education system. Used to be a survey of school and students and sometimes teachers, and that is designed to provide evidence about the level of education system, on the performance of pupil at a specific stage of education and in some subjects, not all of them. Some regional and international assessments have been listed, such as PISA, PASEC, EGRA, Team Spurs. And those regional and international assessments provide information about more than one education system. An important issue is about the fact that those assessments did not provide certificates and or individual score. The type, it is more summative, even though sometimes it is formative. For example, in the SACMEC study, we know that at the end of this knowledge test, some responses are provided. Who are in charge of developing the assessment, depending on the level. If it is a national assessment, it is the Ministry of Education. But when the countries participate to regional and international assessment, there is a joint effort between the partner and the Ministry of Education. The partner used to develop, and sometimes in collaborative way, the instruments, and the ministry is implementing. In terms of data processing, analyzing, and reporting, the partner can also provide support to the Ministry of Education. What subjects are assessed? It used to be core subject, not all of them. And in addition, some background questions are given to students, teachers, and school head. The idea is to identify relationship between achievement and some relevant factors for the education system. For example, to identify regions where there is a need to target intervention, for example. What level of students are assessed? They used to be selected grades, for example, early grades, or it can be later grades. And in addition, there's some assessment that focus on student age groups, for example, 15 years old. The interval of those assessments is depend on the level. There's some national assessment that is conducted every year or every 2 years. Regional and international assessment used to be done every 2, 3, 5 years, not annually. What are your role in this assessment? As I said, most of the participants say, no, I don't have any role in that. There was one or two say that they already participate to those assessments. There was a teacher, there was a trainers of teachers. And what was very interesting is that among the participants, there was a lot of researchers, consultants, and partners who are very interested in the results of those assessments. Okay, so thank you. So I'm giving the floor to Miyoko.
Okay. Let me do it.
Yeah.
It requires a really nice hands to do it.
One.
Okay, now, thank you very much, Stephanie. I'm just going to, okay, now the camera is back on us. And just to connect both of the activities a little bit, I just would like to say a few words. The ultimate goal for those two combined activities would be to actually to map out all of the existing assessments in your country in order to examine whether the important purposes are covered by by using the different kinds of assessment. And therefore, as Stephanie just mentioned, that would be very interesting to compile the data that you have submitted by country. And as an experiment, I have just done it for one country, and I'd like to just show you a little bit if I can manipulate this thing. Okay, what we see here is for the country Kenya. Okay, there were several participants who are from Kenya. So I just categorized by the kinds of tests or kinds of assessments that were suggested by the participants. You remember that in activity 2, the question was to list only one that you can think of or you can remember. And interestingly, actually 80% of them, 80% of the Kenyan participants actually went for the Kenyan certificate of primary education. Now that is very interesting for me. And then the rest of them, like 20% of the participants from Kenya, listed something about some kind of a learning assessment, like the international one, you know, EGRA, EGMA, UEZO, etc. Now, it may be argued that this also depends on who you are. You know, it may be that maybe you did not. None of the Kenyan participant chose the classroom assessment as the one that's selected by by them, and then I'm sure that the classroom assessment exists because I know, and then there are many exercises at classroom level exist. And but then what was interesting was that even those participants from Kenya who are the students or former students or the teachers currently, they all went, most of them actually went for this primary education certification examination. So that seems to suggest that, you know, in Kenya, this kind of a certification type of purpose, summative, certification purpose is put as a very high priority at the country level. So that is something that I just wanted to point out. Now, I'm going to ask, okay, I am receiving some questions from the participants. So I'm going to ask some questions to our presenters. So I will come back to the heads. All right. Okay. Question number 1. Let me see. I'll just read the question. When an assessment has 2 parts, practical assessment and exam component, what type of assessment would this be considered? Now, who can answer that one? Yeah. Well, one thing that I can say is that it's with the assessment, the tool itself. As Stephanie mentioned a while ago, even a very summatively or it can be used in a very formative way, and it all depends on the creativity of the people who are using the assessment data. Anything to complete, Stephanie?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sorry. In my country, France, for example, at the end of secondary level, there is what we call baccalaureate, and I'm sorry, and also at the end of junior secondary, there is another certificate name, brevet des collèges. And in those examinations, one part, a proportion of the examination is from a final examination, written examination, and another part of the final mark is on the continuous examination during the year. And we had a discussion with Miyoko whether this continuous assessment that count for the final examination, in fact, are more formative or summative. And in fact, we agree that they are both. They are used as formative because it gives us an idea about the progress of the students during the year, but it's also used for the final examination.
Yep.
Miyoko?
Yep. Thank you, Stephanie. Would you like to compliment with on this question? When an
No, I think
assessment has
you
to.
could,
You want to do the second question? Okay, let's go to the second question.
no, actually, there was
Second
a question
question.
about
Would an assessment
readings.
be classified as annual? It is administered several times for the year at the end of several cycles. Would an assessment be classified as annual if it is administered several times for the year at the end of several cycles?
So it means that the examination is not done once a year, but it is
Several,
done
like by semester or something.
Yeah, by
so,
semester.
Well, by semester, it's not annual, then
No.
it's a continuous kind of assessment,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
What
most
would-
normally that would be a more formative assessment,
Mhm.
probably. Yeah. I was just looking at the question on what reading was relevant for this activity. So I wanted to point to the MOOC and actually to the Unit 1, where you can actually find advice for relevant readings. And I can mention some of it for the Activity 1. First of all, the Incheon Declaration for Education 2030 is of course very relevant and is listed as compulsory reading. In addition, when it comes to international documents, I would point to the reports from the Learning Metrics Task Force, which is also there on recommended reading. It's not as compulsory, but it's there on recommended readings. We also, of course, have a lot of resources on the Learning Portal. If you look to the Monitor Learning section in the Learning Portal, you will find relevant readings. When it comes to the use of assessments, I would also like to point to a report from the OECD from, I think it's from 2013, on evaluation and assessments. And that is also an in-depth study on the use of assessments in more than 20 countries, which is very relevant to look into. When it comes to national readings, for example, national monitoring and evaluation frameworks, the national education strategies, and so on, would also describe how assessments is going to be used in countries. So that is also very relevant to look into.
Okay, thank you very much, Berit. Now, are there more questions? Any other questions? Okay, so what I can say. Oh, there are some more here. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think we can now. Yeah, I need to just remind you that all of the resources that you have seen today will be on the platform. So do not worry if you have missed something or something like that. So the next Hangout is going to be next Tuesday.
Tuesday, 16th.
Next Tuesday on the 16th of February. And we will have some guest speakers from the Southeast Asia Primary Learning Metrics project. Okay, so are there any other housekeeping things? It's okay? Everything is okay. All right. Thank you very much for staying up late, or thank you very much for coming back from lunch earlier, or thank you very much for staying with us. All right. So see you next time. Bye-bye. Say bye to everybody.
Bye.
Bye. And then the team. Goodbye. All right.